Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we are talking about when players do weird things.
Yes.
I didn't like Saul's title, so I changed it.
Mine was a little bit more crass, I believe. Not that bad, though. I don't think it was that bad.
Anyway.
So when they do crazy things, sometimes this could be very disruptive to the GM, or it might even upset other players.
So what kind of things are we talking about?
Now, in my games, this hasn't happened too often, and I don't know if just because we play with the same people we have for an extremely long period of time, and we've tend to weeded out people who disrupt the game in our eyes or are not team players or however you want to describe it. I think and then another thing is we've probably been really lucky.
I think that's probably the one.
This I've heard quite a bit of discussion about this, and I've heard quite a few horror stories about this happening in people's games, and sometimes quite often. And it's really could be frustrating for the GM and even the players, depending on what situation is happening. Now, a big one for me is, or one that has happened sort of in my game, was stealing from the party.
Stealing from the party?
Yes, depending on the group or the genre or whatever. But I remember one person saying that when they were playing in Dragonlance World, they have the halflings, but they don't call them halflings. They call them the kin or the kern, or I don't know. I'm not sure. I've never read Dragonlance. But they were halflings, but they like stealing stuff. So anybody who played one of those characters was immediately suspect that it was going to steal from the party, because that's what their description was.
So they were kleptomaniacs?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And people would just like hate somebody playing that character or those type of characters. They would use that as an excuse to steal from the players or steal treasure before the rest of the party got to it and stuff like that. But in my own experience, this has happened. We were playing space opera. Forget the group and I forget the year. It was quite a few years ago. And we invited these two people to play. I did, actually. Invited two new players to play because we had lost some players for whatever reason. One of them decided to make like a Corporal O'Reilly character. Now, those of you who do not know who Corporal O'Reilly is or was, he's a fictional character from the show MASH. Now, if you don't know what a MASH unit was, it's a mobile ambulatory hospital thing, sort of a comedy about what war was that?
It was the Korean conflict.
The Korean conflict. There wasn't a war, but during Korean conflict, so there was this character who was a corporal, and he was like the logistics guy, and he was a person who would finagle requisitioning things and getting things signed by the colonel, and just overall just a clerk, like an office clerk, but also did all kinds of functions. And so he was very knowledgeable about getting stuff done.
Yes.
I think that's the basis of what he might have even said. Oh, I want to make a character like Corporal O'Reilly, which was not combat focused, and space opera is a very combat focused game. And these guys were all part of a security for a outpost base, like Babylon 5. Think of Babylon 5, or even, what's the other one? The Star Trek one?
Deep Space Nine.
Deep Space Nine. So this large space station that has a mix of races living there from different parts of the universe. And the characters were in charge of security. Now, they weren't really security. They were actually still in the military, but they were kind of like, the troublemaking outfit. So for their last tour of duty, they were assigned security on the space station, which is kind of like a step below of everything they do, because they were like, what do you call it? They were special ops. They were
So they were being punished.
Yes, because they were so irreverent about their command, right? They were very, they just weren't respectful of the people above them. And even though they were super successful and super, competent, one person who they slighted was instrumental in giving them this post. Doesn't matter. That's what happened. That's what but they're overqualified for just security. And I'm using quotes that you can't see. So Charlie, I think his name was Charlie. He was the Corporal O'Reilly. That's what he wanted to do. And what happened is that they worked security, but then they would go on off-book mercenary missions where they would get paid quite a bit of money to do things that they weren't supposed to. So there's that. So
Which totally sounds like a space opera game.
So Charlie was taking the money because he was the guy who would
in charge of the
money and invested in all this other stuff. So right off the top, he started skimming money. But one of my players was very paranoid, and he said, "I'm going to watch this new guy, see what he does." I go, "Well, you don't have accounting, and all this other stuff." He goes, "Okay, but I can go through another person who is an accountant, and they could, So I had to make a complete character that was good with money, and then I had a roll to see if he would catch what Charlie was up to. So at first he wasn't catching it, right? So a couple of missions go by, and then everybody's getting paid or they put in their accounts, and then finally something he did was a mistake, and he got flagged. And then this character, without the Charlie knowing about it, or the player, told everybody else what was going on. I think it was in an email. It might have been right before they showed up, but they said this, so they were really upset. Right? It was a, what do you call it?
The players were upset.
The players were upset, and therefore their characters were upset that somebody that they trusted was stabbing them in the back, so to speak. Somebody in your unit was breaking the rules of camaraderie and being respectful of each other, and it was a sign of disrespect. At least that's how they took it. A little bit while later on in that session, they showed him they put him in a, what do you call that?
A space lock?
Yeah, space lock and they gave him the choice. They go, either you take a walk without your spacesuit, or you're going to knock off what you're doing and give us the books and show us how much you were stealing. And he decided to do that. But then by that time, the trust of the players and of the characters was gone. So he wasn't allowed to, somebody else took over the money aspect of it. And then slowly that player and that character was kind of shunned. And after a couple months after that incident, both those new players decided not to play with us anymore, which was fine by me, right? Because I understand why the players were upset.
Which is funny because a lot of I don't think the kids were born yet. Maybe Ian, when you were playing with them.
Yes, it was.
It was a long time ago.
Ian was a baby, and I don't think Alan or.
But I just remember that since I know who the players are, I remember when we were playing with the kids when there were like between 8 and 14, 15, 16 to today. But we haven't got to play for a while. But Steve was always in charge of the money.
Okay.
And he said how much.
Steve is one of
the two of the kids, and he always made sure to tell everybody, okay, this is how much money we have, yes. And he would divide it, and he said, write it down on your sheets.
Right.
And so the boys would have been totally offended if they ran into a character or player who was trying to cheat them today, because it was equal. And it was like, it wasn't only just because we were playing and it was like a lesson in math and stuff, but it was because you're part of the group, you get a share of the money, and everybody gets the equal share, right?
I think it's just trust, right? Because think about it as a character, if you're role playing, right, is that you are, especially in a military campaign like this one was, your character's life is dependent on the person next to you. Right. In this case, you're in the armed forces. You hear that all the time, right? Between people who were in the real armed forces, the Army, Navy, they're brothers in arms and stuff. And then if you see combat, then it raises that level of camaraderie and respect for each other. And then when you go against something that does that, that's really bad. I think not necessarily do the people who are playing role-playing games feel that same connection to each other, but they do have a connection to each other in a certain sense that we're a group, and no matter what comes against us, we're going to stand together. And that gives them the sense that it's wrong to steal from your own
At least the groups that we play with.
And that's true. I have played in games where the player was cheating the other players, right? Or characters. And one of them is a long time ago. We had a druid who was collecting the money, and back then we were running AD&D, which had training, and it became very communistic, at least socialistic type of thing, because what had happened is no one person, the shares, could train somebody in the group to go up a level. We'd have to go on so many missions. So what would happen is we would get in line to train. Like, okay, you're going to go up a level, and if you go up a level, then the next person to go up a level is going to be A, and then B, and that's why we're pulling our money together. And it worked, because otherwise, if you all took your own little sums, and my brother who was running the game was supposedly very stingy, and that's what some people remember.
He says it was just the book that he was using.
It was according to the table,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. So because the tables were
very
Monty Hallish for AD&D. Anyway, so the one character, the druid, who was older than the other players, and the player was older than the other players, was skimming money off the top and still getting the job done as far as helping them get trained and them going up levels. So everybody was perfectly happy, right? And even when I caught, because I guess I was not there for the summer, and I came in the autumn, and I was like, hold on, the whole treasure was whatever 200 gold, and there's 6 of us. I go, what's my share again? Oh, okay, all right. And then I kept questioning him the way he divided the money, and it was literally, in my memory, it was he would go 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for me. And when I tried to tell the other players of this thievery, they absolutely refused to believe me, because they're like, we're getting what we want. We're actually going up a level, because before this, we weren't going up levels at all because we didn't have enough money, but now we're getting trained and going up levels. And I'm like, he's cheating you. And they absolutely refused to believe me because it was working, right? Where before they weren't going up levels. They were stalled.
So they were happily being...
And they were happily being, I don't know what you call it, taken advantage
swindled.
of. That does happen.
Yeah.
And it depends on how upset the player is and how the characters will deal with that situation. Right. And maybe even the player might get a little bit upset, but if they're a good role player, they look at their character and what the motivations of the character are, and they may be more forgiving than the actual player. That's very hard to role play, but players can sometimes rise to that level of understanding as far as what their character. Like in this case, the druid needed more money because he had to get spells and all that stuff, at least according to the druid. And then basically the rest of the crew was a bunch of fighters and miscellaneous things.
But as a GM, I guess it doesn't really matter unless it matters to you if the other players don't know what's going on.
Right. I think what I'm getting at is it could rise to the situation where the other players find this irreprehensible,
yes, and
will make people upset.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I don't know. I don't know. I think something like that would have to happen, and I'm not sure as a GM you find this guy cheating you.
And you didn't.
And I didn't. The only reason they did it is because somebody was very suspicious already. Only because he was a new player, right, and a new character. And, they were a closely knit group already, and, they had been playing for years already, so these 2 players were a little bit suspect to begin with. At least in this person's eyes. Everybody else was like, oh, yeah, no problem. They didn't even care. But one was extremely suspicious and caught him, and then the thing happened. I think stuff like that does happen, and I think depending on how upset the players get, then it's a situation that could cause strife among the group. And that's what we're here to have fun, not cause people to get upset.
I recently read a story about I was looking for topics, and I came across this horror story of stuff happening in D&D games. And this one was about a guy was invited to play in a group, He knew the game master, and he knew the game master's wife and their friend, but he didn't know the other person. That was
Okay.
And so they started the campaign, and the game master had signed off on all the characters, and he was a warforged. So I guess
It was
that
a
means
construct.
he was like a golem, or
a golem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're going along. They've been playing it in a campaign for like a few months, and
Okay.
this one guy that they were playing with, he's a paladin, and he when they got into a he was kind of got upset about different things, right? And was
The character.
the character,
The
no,
paladin.
the player,
Oh.
and which the paladin acted like the player.
Yes.
So they get into this battle, and the warforged gets his face blown off. Like, so when the paladin sees what the GM is describing happens, the wizard or sorceress, she's going to go and heal him, but he's like going, "What's going on?" And so I guess it really pissed off the player. Because
Which player?
The one that was the paladin.
Oh, okay.
Said he stopped the game, and he went and he had to have a conversation with the GM, and he's like, and one of the guy's friends goes, "Oh no, here we go."
Really?
And this guy hadn't played with this other person before.
Right.
I don't know any of
But
their
they had
names,
experienced a similar situation.
But this guy had experienced this guy's behavior before.
Uh-oh.
And the girlfriend, because they both kind of rolled their eyes at each other.
Ah.
So they hear them yelling in the kitchen. And
This is the GM and that player.
GM and that player
Oh,
and that.
Jesus.
And that player goes, "I'm not playing with a warforged. This is supposed to be a fantasy game." So he goes, "None of this sci-fi stuff."
Oh,
Which,
okay.
by the way, I don't think a golem is sci-fi, but
No. Because you magically imbue something
Yeah.
with life force.
so he came in, and I guess the GM told him, "No, I already approved all the characters. This is what we're going to do."
Right.
So when he came back to the table, he looked at the guy and he goes, you need to kill that character and create a new character, because
jeez.
I'm not playing with you." And the guy's like taken aback, right? Like going, "Well, my character was approved, and this is what I want to do." He grudgingly played for like one more time, and then the next time they played, he goes, did you make a new character?" And he goes, "No, this isn't the character I'm playing." And the guy just lost it, and the GM had to yell at him and tell him, they went into another room, and he goes, "No, either this is what is happening. If you don't want to play, you can leave." And he left, and he never came back.
Wow. That is a very odd person, I think. I understand that he doesn't want to mix his sci-fi with his fantasy. I know there's people out there who don't like to mix their chocolate with their peanut butter, but a lot of people like Reese's, and I don't know what I would tell you. I think that is a very odd thing to get upset about.
And it was very disruptive for the whole game.
Right. And that's ridiculous because if it's a fantasy world that you can literally raise people from the dead and imbue people with their life force again and bring back their souls, if that's even part of the game, then capturing a soul from somewhere or creating a life force and then putting it into a
golem,
a construct, right? Whether you think it's a robot or golems, I think in
clay,
in D&D they could be made of clay, of flesh, of iron even. So iron golem, So I think this player was totally out of line and was just was very small thinking as far as what could happen in a fantasy game. Also, Warforged is been around for a long time. I don't know when this happened. It could have been a new thing, but there's been a lot of people use them because they like Warforged because of certain abilities that they have and things like that. Because they're very they're very hardy.
Powerful, yeah.
But the problem is that you can't heal them. You have to like fix them.
Right.
And weird things like that. Yeah, that is. And then when it escalates to people yelling, then I think that's when you just say, you know what, stop the game. You either deal with this like a normal person or with a sane person, like a sane person, or you can leave. And that's the open door policy. If you don't like it, you can leave the table. This sort of happened with me. I was running my Western game, and there was a player who was playing a Native American, and there was another player who was Asian in real life, but playing a English. I think he might have been Scottish or something, but it was an Old West game. So the person playing the Native American character was calling out this NPC for being a bigot, and he wanted to get backed up by the other player. And even though there was two other players, he pointed at the Asian player and said, "You should know what's going on here. You should be offended." And then the player goes, "I'm white. I'm just telling you that you're barking up the wrong tree in a room full of people," because they were in a saloon, "of drunk people who have been drinking. Everybody here has a gun, and you want to pick the guy who's buying drinks for everybody and who's rich and has a lot of friends in here, and you're going to like pick a fight with them, and you want me to back you up." He goes, "No, I'm not doing it." So then the player who did that was getting upset at the player. And then he kept going on, and then finally said, "You know what? This needs to stop. This has nothing to do with the game or whatever's going on. He's made the decision what his character is going to do. That's what's going to happen. And you need to decide what you're going to do." He backed off, he left the saloon in a huff, and then he left. And then we go, "Let's take a break," because the other two players were like, after a while, it's like, "Hey, you know what? We're not backing you up either." And I thought, why is he pointing at the only Asian player and everybody else is, for all intents and purposes, white, even though one was like from some
Eastern
European. He had a interesting accent. I was taken aback about the situation because at first I thought he was his character talking. Then
you realize that it was the player,
right? Because even the player goes, "Are you mad at me, my character? Or are you mad at me?" And then he goes, "I'm mad at you." And I'm like, you know what? And then the other player's going, "Oh, hold on. You're taking it too far. This is ridiculous." And so when he saw that everybody at the table was like, "You're out of line," he finally, calmed down, was able to calm himself down. And after the game, he apologized. But for me, it was a late apology that meant absolutely nothing, right? Because he continued to play, but I was not happy with him. And basically, I should have kicked him out of the game before he got that far, when he was getting angry. I was in shock myself. I was like, wow, this is crazy. Because I've never really been in that situation where people are yelling at each other.
But Morgan, and
right.
Was Morgan getting upset about it? Or
no, not at all.
Morgan was just like, "I'm playing this white guy, dude.
Yes.
What are you talking about?"
And he explained the situation. He goes, "There's one of me, and then there's you, and there's like 16 other people in this who's listening to this guy and agreeing with him. And you want to start a fight with the guy?" He goes, "It doesn't make any sense." He goes, "You're not making sense." And then he, of course, this was like out of character conversation, right. And he was trying to explain to his point of view. He goes, "Me, I'm a farmer," because that's basically right. What he was. He goes, "I carry a gun, but I can't really use it. And I know when people start shooting guns, people start dying."
Yeah.
And he was right. He was totally right. And then when Morgan said, "Are you mad at me? Or are you mad at the character?" He goes, "I'm mad at you." I'm like, and then everybody goes, "Hey."
That's when you should have said, "You need to leave."
Yeah. I should have kicked him out of the game right then and there. But I said I was in pretty much shock, even as much as I played. Because I've never really been in a situation like that, especially with strangers, with the stranger acting really weird. I mean, that's been a running rule of my table is I don't want any person versus person, player versus player, not person versus player, combat or fighting. It's just not something I want at my table. I explained that at the very beginning. It doesn't do anything for people having fun. The only time I let it go or even consider it letting that situation happen is if they're role-playing and they can handle role-playing that. Because there was a situation when two players had captured, or the group had captured an orc, and one of them wanted to execute the orc because they're like, "Well, we can't really be tugging around a prisoner."
Yeah.
Right? And then the other goes, "Well, we can let him go." And he goes, "Well, then he's going to come back and fight us. So no, we can't let him go." So that debate happened for like 10 minutes between the characters. And then I finally said, "Okay, you got to make a decision because the enemy army's coming and this decision has to be done now." So the one character killed the orc, the captive, and the other character and the player was upset, but understood the situation. And so we kept playing. That kept being a problem between the characters. Now, the players were a little bit upset at each other, but they understood. They were grown people and understood, well, each understood
and
the
they also
others.
had known each other and played with each other for a
Right.
long time.
And they each knew each other's point of view.
Right.
And they understood. And so at the end of the campaign, they're like, oh, that was a good game. And that animosity that existed between the characters was pretty cool, even though they never went at it like combat-wise.
Right.
Yeah. They never showed up in that sense. That's what you don't want, is when things at the table show up. I mean, in the game, show up at the table.
Right.
Between players. And people get upset. Like,
well, I was shocked when you told me about your Western game.
Oh, yeah.
Because you would think that, I don't know what the guy was thinking. I don't even want to think about what he was thinking.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was so shocking to me, is that I'm like, hold on. Why is he pointing at the only non-white person in this room, other than me, the GM, who is running the game? So I think another thing is what happens is when players do crazy things, GMs allow them to do crazy things. That's fine. I allow players to more or less do anything they want, except for...
You do usually ask, are you sure you want to do that? Which will stop me most of the time.
Stop most players, at least who know me.
That means he's going to let you do the crazy thing, but you're going to roll, and if you die, you die.
Well, that's just it. And I think that's what I'm kind of going to end on, is you as a GM, not end it, but continue this conversation. When you are the GM and players are doing oddball stuff that you really can't understand, there has to be consequences in the game for their actions. Now, I'm not talking about in the old days when GMs used to get mad. I'm talking
adversarial GMs.
Adversarial GMs back. I'm talking way back, like AD&D and original D&D. They called it blue lightning, right? When the GM got mad at the player,
blue lightning came out of the
blue
sky.
lightning came out of the sky and struck the character and did either enormous points of damage. And I think that the classic was you take like -5 charisma. Right, because then nobody wanted to be around you, and you elicited all kinds of negative reactions from people. I've never used blue lightning in any of my games, and I never even thought about it. And I don't think I've seen anybody use it, like in games that I was playing. So for me, it was a rare thing, but it definitely was a joke that people said, and I heard throughout the years of playing. And I think you're right. That comes from an adversarial GM point of view.
Were you asking people, are you sure you want to do that? Is like
I just want to make sure that, because like there's going to be consequences for doing things that go beyond what's expected of that character, right? Like if you're a paladin and you're doing an evil act, I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? Because pray to a god who's supposedly lawful good or whatever, and they don't like evil things, and then you do an evil act. Are they going to grant you the spells that you want? Are they going to help you when you pray to them? Are your healing hands going to work when you get 2 hits of criticals? Maybe, but maybe not, right? So I think that's what I mean by consequences. And like, it was one situation when one of my players decided to fight off a city guard, and he was using a 2-handed sword. I go, you sure you want to use a 2-handed sword? He goes, yeah. I go, you know what? You can't hit subduing damage with a 2-handed sword. He goes, yeah, he was like really upset that the guards would, how dare they, ask him to put away their weapons or something like that. I forget what it was. And it was a city guard, right? So it was like, why are they going to let some people they don't know, new or strangers to town, armed to the hilt, walking around? No, we don't allow that. And so he refused, and then he fought, then he killed one. He had a 2-handed sword. In the rules, I think it does 2 to 8, 2 to 10, or in AD&D, I know the damage is 3 through 18 plus your strength bonus. So it does a lot of damage. And a city guard is going to have 12, 14 hit points, maybe second level, theoretically. And so he kills them, and then he was like, so then he was a wanted man, and the whole city went after him, the town, threw him in jail. And so there had to be this thing about how are we going to get him out of jail. And then other player was like, Why did you do this? He was like, couldn't believe what was, and so I threw him in jail, and I made the party pay like an exorbitant amount of gold to pay for this person's funeral and their expenses for the family for that person's more or less natural life, which was a ton of money, which had to come from the party funds, or everybody had to donate because they had split up the money. And he was upset at me that I had. He goes, "Oh, I know I could have killed him." I go, "I asked you, are you sure you want to use a two-handed sword?" And I said, "You cannot do subduing damage with a two-handed sword." And he continued. So there was consequences for his actions, and I made everybody pay for it because they could have let him rot in jail. I go, "Well, you can let him rot in jail. You can roll a new character." And they're like, "No, we'll pay." And they were not happy because the kids love the money.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
Oh,
were you there?
Yes.
Blaine was there, right?
Yes.
I remember Blaine being there too. So I think if a player consistently does things like this, that is out of the norm, at least out of the norm for them, or I don't know that of them playing this way, I think there's a situation that you have is something's not wrong with the player, but the player isn't happy about something. And I got some 3 ideas off the top of my head. Is they do not want to play in this game for whatever reason. They want to play D&D, and you're playing Starforge or Starfinder, right, or something like that, right? Or you're playing a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and they don't want to play it. They don't want to be there. They're bored of the game, or they don't like the adventure. Like, this adventure doesn't. Why is my character here? Like a lot of times, like I get this a lot. I hear this a lot from like people playing like a druid or a ranger, and it's a city adventure. Well, I can't really use all my powers. I have animal companions, no animals, or whatever. Or they're just not happy that they're in a big metropolis city and doing investigative work, right? Or they don't like their character. Sometimes when people are don't like their character anymore, they want their character to be killed, and so they can roll up a new character. Now, most people are adults, and they'll say, "Well, I don't want to play this character anymore. Can I roll up a new character?" But sometimes people, don't want to. They feel weird about that, so they go, "Can I?" They don't say anything. They just put their characters in situations where they're going to get whomped on. So, but as a GM, you have to figure out what's going on, and possibly I wouldn't ask the person the questions in front of the whole party, but email them, or if they leave last, have a conversation. Goes, "Hey, I'm and tell your as a GM, you have a right to ask. You're not feeling this game, or are you happy with the way things are going?" That's a viable thing to do. And then there's some people who are just like disrupting things, right? There's an old friend of ours who was just always he loved playing chaotic evil because he thought it was the best alignment because he could do anything he wanted. Nothing was off the table. He could kill people on sight, and he often did, at least he did. Not that he played with me, but he played with other people, other friends of mine when they used to play by themselves, and he would go after, and they would have character versus character combat, player versus player, and he would stab them in the back and steal money from them and poison them and do all kinds of weird things. And he was just a disruptor, and he loved playing that way. He would laugh when doing weird things like that. So that's just a disruptor. And then I remember playing in the game, and I told the players, "Look, I haven't run the system at all. This is an introductory scenario. I'm running an adventure, a published adventure. So that's what I want you. I'm telling you, it might be a little railroady. I'm giving you a destination to go. I hate to tell you, but you kind of have to stay, on those rails." And one player was like, "Let's go over there. That looks interesting." But me, being the GM that I was, I go, "Oh, okay, they want to go over there." And so I'm like scrambling for them to encounter stuff. And like I said, it was a new system for me, and it didn't go very well. That campaign or game ended rather quickly. But then again, like I said, I like players letting them do what they want and letting the characters express themselves in any way they want. But like I said, the key to me is there has to be consequences for their actions. If they're disrupting the players, if they're disrupting the table, that's a real person conversation you have to have with that player. Like that one example you gave of that guy getting mad that the Warforged was the guy was still playing a Warforged. That's crazy. And that guy getting mad at Morgan because, I guess, because as an Asian, he should have felt enraged by this
Racist NPC?
Racist NPC.
Even though you're in the Wild West.
Yes.
And the real Wild West, not the fake.
Yeah. This wasn't Deadlands or the occultish one. This is a straightforward
Western,
right? Nothing hokey, no spells, no hucksters, no undead walking around. Just a regular old Western where people can easily die.
Yes.
If they get shot.
Because bullets hurt.
And if you get shot, you get put out of commission.
For a very long time.
I understand Morgan didn't want to get into a fight right away because he didn't know what was going on. And certainly when he didn't know where people stood in a group of 16 people. And like I said, some people had been drinking and everybody was armed. So probably a bad situation to go in there with guns blazing.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I could see that.
So hopefully this helps. Like I said, I think you can, as a GM, you could let the players do what they want, but have consequences. And then if there's a player who's upsetting the table, that's something that you have to
in real life.
You have to talk,
or online if you're not in real life.
That's true.
I guess it is kind of in real life. Anyway, there you go. Hopefully this helps you. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.